Well, thank you all for those 3 great presentations. We have a list of several questions. I invite participants, if you have questions for discussion, to please enter them into the chat box, and we'll be able to try to address them as time allows. I will present questions, and I'll ask a particular presenter to speak to it first, but I want this as much as possible to be a discussion, a virtual panel here. So please feel free, if I didn't direct the question directly to you to start, to add on anything that you may want to from your own state's perspective. One of the first questions I have, and I'll just go right to you, Serene Yee from California, because you guys have been doing those kindergarten learning inventory, you call it a profile, I believe since the 90s. You said 1999, and it's been over 15 years. Can you just speak a little bit to the ongoing process of improving, validating, and expanding the tools used? I asked this question because many states have the question about which tool to pick, as if it's just a one-time activity, that once you pick the tool for early learning inventory, then you're set and done. And I think the state of California has shown through many versions and additions and changes that it's not just a one point in time activity in terms of selecting an early learning inventory.
Yes, so I'm going to introduce my colleague Carrie again. She's been on the project longer than I, so Carrie will take this question. Hello, everyone. With the DRDP in California, as Eboni, as you are aware, there's been multiple iterations, and that has been in response to state early learning standards, that as those evolved in California, we call them the early learning foundations. And as the early learning foundations were evolved and developed, California revised their DRDP assessment to be aligned to the foundations. And then over time, there were additional requests. One request was to align the infant, toddler, and preschool assessments onto one continuous continuum, and that was a piece of work that was done. And then later on, to develop the first kindergarten readiness assessment, which was the DRDP school readiness. And at that time, the idea was to have a kindergarten entry assessment, and later on it evolved into the DRDP-K, which was to look at children's development over the kindergarten year, and then to align that to the preschool so that the continuum actually overlaps between DRDP preschool and DRDP-K.
Mary Ann, is there anything you want to add from your experience of Pennsylvania in terms of you mentioned in your presentation a lot about sustainability for the tool along with the validating the tool over time? Mary Ann? All right, well, we'll move on to another question. I'm not hearing Mary Ann speaking. Joe, do you want to talk a little bit about, from your perspective, you have both the kindergarten and the pre-K assessment, and getting into that part about alignment of assessments. Can you speak to more about the alignment of the two assessments you have in your state, particularly around some of the developmental domains of most importance to you?
Yes, absolutely. So early on, as New Mexico was looking to develop the instrument under Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge, because of the unique nature of our student populations and circumstances, it was determined early on that we would use an instrument that teachers were familiar with across the state. So looking at what was already happening in pre-K, in terms of both the development of our early learning guidelines, which is our framework for preschool teachers in which to operate across developmental domains, and in terms of assessment, we looked at building off what was already working and already happening in the pre-K classrooms as a way to set a foundation for developing a kindergarten entry assessment, or ELI here, for our kindergarten teachers. We continue to build and foster the relationships from pre-K through K, including the development of our early childhood observation tool, or the online system actually, to house both the observations for pre-K and K, so that teachers can see the data from year to year. Additionally, we look for opportunities to train preschool teachers and kindergarten teachers side by side, so that we not only validate what has been happening in pre-K, but also use them as the experts in the room to support kindergarten teachers in using what is most typically a new type of assessment for them in kindergarten. So on the other side of that, we use kindergarten teachers as sort of the experts in the room in terms of using data to drive their instruction, and support preschool teachers in understanding how to better use that data to meet the individual needs of their kids in an intentional way. So I think that speaks to how we continue to try to build the collaboration between pre-K and K. If there's any other information, just let me know.
And I hear it also speaks to how you're using the data to actually inform instruction across both pre-K and K.
Correct. And oftentimes, we'll have, as I'm sure most people do, we'll have students who are coming in maybe not at where we would hope they would be, but in terms of being able to go back and look through preschool data and see, maybe they're not quite where we want them to be yet, but they made, a year's growth or a year and a half year's growth last year in the pre-K program. So it's wonderful to start seeing those conversations happen, and recognizing we presented first, so we're the least experienced in this area. It's something that we continue to hope to improve upon and continue that growth.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Mary Ann, do we have you back? We're still having audio issues, I believe, with Mary Ann. So I'll ask this question to both Joe and Serene, and if Mary Ann does come on, and she might be able to hear us, but we can't hear her. In both the cases, you guys have developed your own ELI, your own early learning inventory, broadly speaking. Can you say what some of the challenges have been in developing your own instrument? Serene, maybe I'll start with you, and then Joe can add on.
Sounds good.
Sure. I think we're going to say it took a lot of time, and it still takes a lot of time, using our resources to validate the tool, research studies that went into it. That part was difficult. But being able to customize and have the instrument be responsive and integrated with our other parts of the system, that's also a challenge for us, because we are local control and we have 58 counties. They're all very local. Take up on the implementation of it is a little more difficult. But we do see the benefits of that, in that even for our Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge, the DRDP is part of the rating matrix that we use there. So I think we'll go with that.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of New Mexico, we did have the benefit. Yes, we developed our own instrument. We didn't purchase a product from anywhere, and that on the positive sense, that gives us some sort of skin in the game and some credibility with our teachers, that it was decided to go that direction because we believe it's responsive to our unique needs. As well as on the flip side of that, thinking of maybe some of the challenges in doing it that way, is the consensus or some of the questions and comments around updating the indicators that were already used in pre-K. So we did make some changes and things like that based on current research, and just had to be careful to message those correctly to pre-K teachers who had already been using these indicators, and sort of message and brand that around current research and new findings, and the continuous improvement process, more than just changing, their indicators without grounds to do so. So I think that was probably one of the bigger challenges, is just continuing to improve and meet consensus based on research for the indicators themselves.
Great, thank you. I do have Mary Ann back on the line, I believe. Mary Ann, go ahead and speak so we can hear your voice.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, good, lovely. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you, Joe and Serene, about that. And going on with this developing your own ELI, Mary Ann, maybe you could speak to part of developing your own ELI is you also have to develop your own training processes, like how you train whoever's administrating this. Often it's teachers, kindergarten teachers in the case of Pennsylvania. So could you speak a little bit towards the implementation of the tool once it was developed in terms of getting your teachers onboarded, learning what the tool is about, getting, especially as a volunteer system, I believe, in Pennsylvania. So could you speak a little bit about that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I think that the first year of our implementation was definitely the trickiest in regard to professional development, because the entire school district of Philadelphia decided actually to implement district-wide, and they wanted face-to-face training. So we were looking at over 150 teachers. And we kind of broke it into networks at that particular time, where we actually had to train the trainer in-house, and we went down on one day and in 8 different locations, and we provided that face-to-face training. We have gone through some iterations in regards to our professional development protocol. We went from kind of like a webinar-based system to more of a Moodle platform, which really helped in regards of tracking who was doing our professional development, because once they completed the online version, they then were able to get access into our data entry system. And so Moodle was able to speak to that. But it was really, for the most part, it was certainly challenging, I think, going through a few years of implementation and just streamlining what worked, what didn't seem to work, to kind of where we are now, where we feel pretty competent and confident in our PD protocol. We have certainly recommended, because again, it gives us an opportunity as state-level staff to go and work with kindergarten teachers and kind of talk about some of the things that I mentioned earlier. We do recommend that face-to-face wherever possible, and again, it's free to them. But they have the option of doing the online as well.
And Serene or Joe from California and New Mexico, anything to add in terms of the training and professional development for implementing the assessment tools that you have?
Yeah, this is Joe here. So we've continued to try to refine the way that we're training our teachers and respecting their requirements being asked of them from the district as well, and then also incorporating some fiscal responsibility. And what we've done is we're actually developing online content modules now to support teachers in not only understanding what high-quality observations look like in early childhood, but also the more nuts and bolts of how to use the online system to support those observations. So we're moving towards a more online format in which teachers can access that information as necessary and at their convenience, rather than pulling people in person to complete those trainings. It still has the same components that we were looking for in our in-person trainings, as well as an inter-rater reliability portion. But we no longer ask kindergarten and preschool teachers to attend in person.
So how do the states deal with the burden? I mean, and Serene, you mentioned that a little bit in your in terms of the burden teachers feel in training when they see how long it's going to take, and that's something to be expected with all assessment tools. But many states, when I've worked with them, they always want the shortest. Teachers want the shortest thing they can do in 5 minutes, and shortest may not necessarily meet your purposes and goals and intended for your early learning inventories. So I ask anybody to jump in and speak to this idea of burden when you're trying to implement these tools?
So it's interesting that when we have trainings for teachers and we have trainings for administrators, the feedback that we receive is very positive, and they themselves are able to point out how useful the tool is. I think when we hear that there is a lot on their plates from other teachers, those are the ones who either have had less training or no training because they don't really understand how to use the tool well. But that's also why we have online trainings, but the in-person is also required. So you can't just do online modules. You have to do online modules in conjunction with in-person trainings. So we offer trainings not only for how to understand the tool and how to use the tool, but also for administrators how to look at teachers who are using the tool. We also have a tracking system for who is certified so that we know that they're using the tool to fidelity. We also have shortened tools. So we offer more than one tool. I'm trying to think of how to explain this in a condensed way, but we have a comprehensive tool, so that has 11 domains and sub 55 measures, but we also have an essential domain, essential view, which only has 5 school readiness domains and 25 measures. So we've lightened the load for teachers, hoping that this will help them come on board easier, and when they see the value of using the tool and the difference in their students and their own teaching, then they can ramp up and move to the comprehensive view that has more domains and more measures.
And then from New Mexico's perspective, sort of echoing those same initial comments, was I think a lot of the burden is combated by purpose. So when teachers see the purpose and the high quality data that they're getting on their kids, that tends to overcome a lot of the stress or the challenge of it. I believe our challenge in New Mexico as well is to continue to foster that and support teachers in understanding how to truly use the data so that they continue to see the added benefits of using an instrument like this. But the feedback that we've received as well in our trainings is, this is the information that we want to be gathering, and teachers often talk about, and we talk about in the training, slowing down to better know our kids at the start of the school year so that we can actually take them further when we know them better. So in that case, it helps minimize that burden or that additional challenge on teachers.
We wanted to go
and
back
from your, oh, yes, Marianne, please.
No, this is Serene. I'm sorry.
Oh, Serene. Oh, yes.
We wanted to go back and add that for Rater certification, we purposely use different children and different portfolios so that it would really represent the diversity of the population that we work with. So we have our general ed children, we have children who are English language learners, and we have children who have special needs. So when a teacher goes through the certification, they need to use a different lens when they're looking at the observations and before they rate. And that's calibrated to whoever was the master anchor for the certification.
Thank you, Serene. Well, that final comment does lead me to another question that we received from the audience is about these tools as how they can be used to inform instructions or appropriate use for special populations, particularly dual language learners or English language learners, as you may call them, as well as special needs population, and how to address biases that might be in the tools if you do use these tools for those populations. Marianne, may I ask you to speak to that question first, and then we'll hear from Joe and Serene?
Sure. In regards to using the information to inform instruction, We have a pretty robust data system, and so as soon as teachers begin to enter the skill level determinations from the KEI into the data system, they can actually generate reports which will group by indicator using the 4 levels of the scoring rubric from not yet evident all the way through exceeds. So they can see where children fall, again, indicator or domain level, and that certainly can help them differentiate and tailor their instruction. For the dual language learner population, we have 3 indicators out of the 30 that are required to actually are required in English. But other than that, students are able to use their native language, and that would inform the KEI. And happily, in doing the validation study, we were able to find AIR and UPenn did an advanced research method that actually found evidence that the dimension level scores on our structures could actually be applied equally across gender, across race, DLLs, and children with special needs. So basically, in a nutshell, implementation of the KEI was proven to be valid and reliable for all children. So we were really excited about that.
Thank you. Serene, can you add on about the validity of the tool for different populations?
It does cover, like we said, dual language learners and children with special needs. Our tool is translated into Spanish as well as Chinese. Many of our trainings can be offered in major languages, but it depends in California, which region or which area they live in. We have validity studies that included 500 to 50% of the validity studies included dual language learners.
And Joe, if you have anything to add on that as well in terms of how New Mexico has dealt with the validity for different populations, including dual language learners. And I'll add also how you use the data to maybe work with families or connect with families in New Mexico.
Yeah, so I'm glad this one came up as well because I didn't get a chance to talk about our validation studies that we've completed through AIR. And overall, it was found that the kindergarten observation tool was a valid measure of children's foundational knowledge and skills as well as their academic knowledge and skills. And their learning and social skills at kindergarten entry. But we also conducted a rigorous validation study with the preschool data and kindergarten data as well, with representing students of all of our subpopulations that were representative of our entire state. And those results validated our instrument as well. So in our training, we support teachers in working with those students in the accommodations and support that they're able to provide as guided in the IEP, but also respecting the home language of children and allowing children to respond in their native language and giving them credit at the highest level of proficiency, noting that we're not measuring their English language proficiency, but their language development. So those few things sort of contribute to the tool being appropriate to be used with students of all populations. And then as we share that information with New Mexico's families, the use of that family teacher report is a wonderful resource to continue the conversation with families on building partnerships in the learning process for their children, as well as getting that information out to communities on sort of where we're at and how we're doing. But those conversations around that family teacher report are great in terms of identifying specific needs for children and additional supports as well. And then pre-K and kindergarten are advised to use that data in their either using the child find process in pre-K if a child is maybe going to be requested to conduct another screener or something like that. And then in kindergarten, taking that information to our student assistance teams and helping sort of a team of professionals identify areas that we can improve and different strategies we can try to meet the needs of any of the kids that we have in our classrooms.
Thank you, Joe. I have two more questions for the panel. Before I go to those final questions, I do want to remind anybody who is leaving early, there is in the question and discussion panel on the webinar a link for you to provide us responses to a feedback survey. So if you're, please remember to click on that link and give us your feedback. If you're leaving early, we would appreciate it. Now to the final two questions that I have before in a few minutes that we have left in the webinar. And one was just receiving, one person asked about the costs that are associated with building your early learning inventory system, both in terms of collecting the data and reporting the data. Can you speak to what costs are associated with building your systems for collecting and reporting your early learning inventory data?
This is Pennsylvania. I would say we have the availability to work with our local one of our local intermediate unit, which is a regional education service agency. They were the ones that actually built our data system, and they continue to sustain and maintain the data system. So fortunately for us, what we were looking at is basically around $300,000 a year to build, maintain, and sustain. The largest kind of out-of-pocket that we have spent in regards to our KEI has been going through the validation study. But as far as the yearly contract that we have with our intermediate unit, it's pretty reasonable.
I would just chime in from New Mexico's perspective that dollar amount sounds about consistent with what we've been able to look at for sustainability over time, knowing that we're just maintaining the system now and providing that information to teachers. A lot of the upfront costs were paid under Race to the Top, and now with the implementation of the online learning modules, that cuts down on a lot of costs for us as well.
Hi, this is California. So we did spend a lot of money building it. The good news for everyone else is that other states have been able to use the DRDBK off the shelf for what we consider the basic model. So the different variations or views that we offer in terms of the essential, the comprehensive, those provide other states with flexibility in what they would like. Purchasing additional training, the data system, other options such as entering data, reporting, those are all extras. The instrument is available for free download just by itself. The data system part, those are the parts where you decide what you'd like, and then your options decide how much the cost is.
Okay. Thank you.
We would estimate we would estimate that it was about $7 million to build our three tools, which is the infant, toddler, the preschool, and the kinder.
Great. Thank you for those numbers. So I guess my final question, and I'll ask you to be as brief, maybe just like one quick takeaway for other states that are in the process either building, selecting, or implemented. What would be your one lesson learned in your quickest way to share it to other states? And you can pick either from building, selecting, or implementing your lessons learned to other states.
I think for us it was for New Mexico, it was understanding the needs of our community and then responding and communicating early, openly, and honestly with all the stakeholders involved around why we were doing this and why we went about developing our own instrument. So gather information from your communities and communicate as often as possible.
Marianne?
This is Pennsylvania. Yeah, I think that what I would say is just be very clear in your messaging in regards to the purpose of the tool. As we have experienced over the course of the last few years, some programs, school districts, et cetera, who may want to use the information in ways that it's actually not proven valid and reliable for. So I would just really iterate just to be very clear in your messaging.
Serene?
So our lesson learned is that you want to use a tool that is responsive to the field, to the children that are being served, to the educators that are using it, and to prepare to adapt once it's implemented. Implementation is always a little different once it actually starts rolling. And to involve administrators from the get-go because they're responsible for overseeing the process.
Thank you. Janice?
Yep. Thank you, everyone. The presentations were very interesting, very informative, and we certainly appreciate all of the time and effort of our presenters to be here and to share what's going on in their states. If you continue to have questions, please feel free to reach out to the REL Southwest team. We are happy to find the information that you will need, and keep an eye on our website, please, so you can download the archived presentations. Be on the lookout for future early childhood webinars, as we will have some coming up over the fall and into the next year. Again, thank you, everyone, for being a part of our afternoon. Take a moment to complete the survey, and we will see you next time. Take care.